The first half of this game was intense, with the lead changing with every possession. Lubbock High scored, Ferguson High got the ball, and Ferguson quarterback Danny Kill led his team into the end zone to tie the score. Throughout the first half, the score changed back and forth, and every time Ferguson got the ball, the Jag staff paused and watched as Danny led Ferguson into the end zone. The Humphrey Korean camp was a 15-hour drive from Dallas, Texas, so the game everyone was watching on Saturday afternoon was taking place on Friday evening in Texas as part of the Texas 6A State Championship. The game was broadcast on a 90-inch monitor mounted on the wall and streamed from Lieutenant Grant Keel's cell phone to an Apple TV connected to the JAG office's audio and video system. Ferguson began to pull ahead in the second half, and by the time the 2-minute warning was announced in the fourth quarter, his lead was 48-38. The game wasn't over yet, and anything could have happened, but things were going well for Danny's team, and that's how the game ended. Ferguson won by 10 points. Danny had 275 yards and 4 touchdowns with 1 interception. On Saturday, JAG employees were preparing for the upcoming visit of the Inspector General. And although the Inspector General's inspection was approaching, Lieutenant Kill wasn't too concerned about it. However, there was always the doubt that someone had forgotten to sign or time a document. Usually, on Saturdays, JAG personnel declared the workday complete so that everything would be as close to perfect as possible. This inspection was even more important than others because it was Lieutenant Kill's last visit to the Inspector General's office in connection with his upcoming retirement. Grant was originally scheduled to retire in 3 months, but it was decided that the Inspector General's inspection would be an excellent springboard for a change of command. So shortly after the inspection, he was scheduled to fly back to the United States to begin the process of leaving active duty. Only his brother knew about the change of plans, and Grant was delighted to see the expressions on his wife and son's faces when he returned home. Grant's colleagues applauded his son's performance and patted him on the back, while students, parents, and fans rushed onto the field after the final whistle. Chaos reigned on the field as everyone hugged, jumped, and danced. When the JAG staff saw the slender brunette rush to hug Danny, there were almost deafening cheers and whistles in the office. Everyone had seen the photos of Lieutenant Keel's wife on his desk and envied his beautiful wife. Kat's joy and happiness were written all over her face as she hugged her son after his brilliant performance. The crowd that poured onto the field celebrated, shouting, laughing, and crying, usually all at the same time. However, what she did next caused the shouting and whistling to stop, and the entire office fell silent. Kat rushed into the arms of Randy Kane, Ferguson's head coach, and kissed him. Lieutenant Kill stared at the screen in shock, and the JAG staff looked away in embarrassment. Grant stopped the broadcast, closed Safari, and sat down at his desk, stunned by what he had just seen. By what all his employees had seen. The blatant disrespect shown to him by his wife and his son's coach was unacceptable. "Colonel, are you all right?" Captain Lynn Danaway asked. Grant looked at her and shook his head. "It's not just that she's cheating on me. It's that she's so blatant about it." He was truly shaken. Captain Danaway grabbed Grant by the arm and pulled him out of his chair. "You need some air," she said, leading him out the back door to the small parking lot in front of the JAG office. Grant knew he must look pathetic standing there in the cool Korean morning sun with tears streaming down his face. "What? What? Damn it! Damn it!" Captain Danaway said. "God, Colonel, what she did. It's just awful." Grant stood there trying to comprehend what he had just seen when a message popped up on his phone. "Danny, sorry you couldn't make it. Great game. We won 48-38. I scored 4,175 points and 4 touchdowns." Grant looked at his phone, wondering how to respond. Captain Danaway knew what he was thinking and grabbed his wrist before he could reply to his son. "Send your reply as usual. Don't say anything that could come back to haunt you in the future." Grant nodded in agreement and replied, "Dad, great. Sorry I couldn't be there. Played well? How long do you think this has been going on?" Captain Danaway asked. "What difference does it make if it's a day, a month, or a year? I've been in Korea for 9 months, so it could have been going on the whole time I've been here. We bought a house a year ago, so I don't think it's been going on longer than that, since I'm home every weekend. But now, I wonder how many there have been. Damn it, is Danny even my son?" They talked for another 30 minutes until Grant calmed down enough to return to the office and address his employees. It was the most humiliating and shameful thing he had ever done, and they were shocked by his behavior. Shortly after addressing his staff, Grant thanked them for coming and left. If they still couldn't pass the IG audit, they never would. The following week was spent in the spirit typical of such investigations. Like an audit in the private sector, an internal control investigation is as invasive as a colonoscopy. Everything you have done and every decision you have made is questioned, and all questions must be answered politely and clearly. As a result, they passed the internal control audit, and it was time to hand over command to Lieutenant Kiana Cardwell, who replaced Lieutenant Kyle. Grant had known Kiana for several years and knew that she was an excellent officer and an outstanding lawyer, and that the JAG staff would be in good hands. The only person besides Grant who did not remain in Korea with Colonel Cardwell was Captain Lynn Dunaway. She went with him to Fort Cavazos, Texas, where he would serve on call and join the Army Reserve, while she would go on to a new assignment with the 3rd Corps JAG office. Grant felt he owed Captain Dunaway a great debt. For weeks after he learned of his wife's infidelity, she had been a shoulder for him to cry on and a source of moral support while he filed the paperwork to leave the only steady job he had ever had. Randy Kane walked to his truck in a bad mood. "We don't have to stop. You can divorce him and marry me. I'll marry you without hesitation if you agree." Kat tensed up next to Randy. "I already told you that's not going to happen. I love my husband. When he leaves the Army, I'll spend the rest of my life making up for our little affair. When Grant comes home, we'll see each other in the school hallway or the cafeteria, smile and say hello. I'll still be teaching science and you'll still be coaching and we'll still be friends. But I love my husband and nothing can destroy my marriage." Randy laughed bitterly. "If you love him so much, why am I in your bed?" Kat shook her head. "He's different, but not necessarily better." Randy grumbled discontentedly. Kat met her husband, Grant, at the 2000 Summer Olympics in Sydney, Australia. Kat played on the U.S. women's volleyball team, and Grant was on the U.S. fencing team. Kat was a senior in college, and Grant was a first lieutenant in the Army and a part of the world-class athletes program, which allowed military personnel to participate in sports while serving. Kat and Grant met at the Olympic Village and were immediately drawn to each other. The fact that Kat was from Dallas, Texas, and Grant grew up an hour away in Ferguson, Texas, strengthened their relationship. The U.S. women's volleyball team did not win any medals at the Olympics, but Grant became a 2-time medalist, silver in individual saber fencing and bronze in team saber fencing. Kat explained to Randy that her husband preferred a more aggressive style of fencing, saber, because it involves striking and cutting rather than just touching, as in foil and épée fencing. Randy just stared at her blankly. When Kat first told Randy that her husband was a world-class fencer, Randy imagined some guy who was good at digging holes and didn't understand why she was bragging about him. Upon learning what fencing was, like Zorro, and that it was a real sport, Randy felt irritated and envious of Grant, who was not only married to a beauty like Kat, but was also an Olympic medalist. While the two were having fun in the Olympic Village, Randy was in high school trying to gain weight so he could play football in high school. Playing in high school and then college for the Arkansas team, the 6-foot-tall, 265-pound quarterback was not drafted by any team. As a player, he was signed to the Detroit Lions practice squad but was cut after a year. He was then picked up by the Buffalo Bills practice squad but was released after 3 weeks. Realizing that his NFL career was going nowhere, he signed with the Ottawa Renegades in the Canadian Football League but was released midway through the season. Randy then moved into coaching and quickly rose through the ranks of high school coaches, culminating in his Ferguson team defeating the Lubbock team in the Texas 6A championship. After that victory, several colleges offered Randy a position on their coaching staff, and he felt he was in a good position, although most of the offers depended on whether he would take Danny Killett with him. If only he could convince Kat to divorce Soldier and marry him, life would be perfect. Randy decided he had 3 months to convince Kat to leave her husband and marry him. After that, her husband would retire and return home. Kat hints that they may eventually resume their affair, but that would be the end of it. In the fall, Danny would be going to college and wouldn't be acting the way he used to. If their coach and mom caught them, wouldn't that be a disaster? Kat and Randy thought Danny was out for the day, and Randy went into Kat's kitchen to get some water for them. Danny lunged at the coach with his fist raised, but before Danny could do anything, Randy kicked him, sending Danny crashing to the kitchen floor and nearly knocking him unconscious. Hearing the noise, Kat threw on a robe and ran into the kitchen just as Danny was trying to get to his feet. She stood between her lover and her son and asked them to stop and calm down. Kat assured her son that her relationship with Randy was just a fling that would not affect her marriage. She begged Danny not to say a word to his father because it would destroy him. Danny would be responsible for his parents' divorce and the destruction of his father's life, and his silence was necessary to save his father's marriage and mental health. Danny angrily agreed to keep quiet, and over the past few months he seemed to have gradually come to terms with the affair, and could even joke with his mother and Randy about their relationship at times. Although in the last couple of weeks, Randy had noticed that there was a chill in the air when Danny was around. Randy had to admit that he was partly to blame for the way things had turned out. A couple of weeks ago, the situation had almost gotten out of hand when Danny walked into his bedroom and saw Randy looking at his trophies. "I didn't know you did karate," Randy said. Danny just looked at Randy and asked, "What are you doing in my room?" Randy pointed to the framed certificate. "I have a black belt too. I've been doing karate since I was 8. Randy hoped that he and Danny would develop a relationship that was different from that of coach and player. If Danny saw him as a mentor or stepfather, maybe he would listen to his advice about changing colleges. Danny politely asked Randy to leave his room. Randy continued to chat with Danny about karate and martial arts, but Danny interrupted him, barely containing his anger. "Get out of my room, you son of a bitch!" Randy wanted to respond to Danny, but at the last moment he backed down. He didn't care about Danny's feelings, but Kat, "Have you thought about how to change Danny's mind about college?" Kat rolled her eyes when Randy brought up the subject again. "He won't change his mind. He's been working toward this his whole life, and he's not going to change his mind at the last minute. His father went there, and he's going to go there too. No one but soldiers and sailors care how the Army plays the Navy. I don't understand why he wants to go to West Point when he could go to any Division I university in the country. It doesn't make sense to me. He'll play at a better university, then he'll get drafted into the NFL and leave." After leaving Kat's house, Randy rounded the front of his pickup truck and noticed that the front tire was flat. Damn, he thought. It couldn't get any worse. Randy was already running a little late, and now the thought of having to change a tire annoyed him even more. Today was supposed to be a big ceremony and the raising of the state championship banner. The entire football team and coaching staff would be honored and praised, and Randy was supposed to give a short speech and then introduce each player, saying something funny about them. There would be reporters at the event, and Randy saw it as another opportunity to boost his reputation as a coach. As Randy crouched down next to the flat tire, he sensed, rather than saw, someone standing behind him, and then felt a blow to his back. Randy managed to turn around and look at his attacker, who was wearing a black hoodie, dark glasses, and a black mask that completely concealed his face. He saw the attacker swing an aluminum baseball bat back, and time seemed to slow down as Randy watched the bat come forward. Randy managed to make out the manufacturer's name, Easton, written in large letters on the handle of the bat, and the words B5 Pro Big Barrel below it, as the bat flew toward his face in slow motion. Then, the unknown man grabbed a bicycle parked in the grassy area of the cul-de-sac across from Kyle's house, jumped on it, and quickly rode away from the scene. Running out of the garage to catch up with the picket line, Kat was surprised to see Randy's pickup truck still parked on the street in front of her house. Her house was at the end of a cul-de-sac, and traffic was light, so she never worried about Randy parking his pickup truck in front of her house. Her 3-car garage held her Lexus, Danny's Camaro, and Grant's Lincoln SUV, so the street was the only place for his Dodge Ram with its huge tires and raised suspension. As she backed out, she glanced at his pickup and was surprised to see Randy lying on the street. Thinking he had fallen or was having a heart attack, Kat parked the car and ran to Randy's aid. When she reached him, she saw that his arms and legs were in an unnatural position. And when she looked at his face with his jaw hanging open, she screamed, and the world went black for a moment. Coming to her senses, Kat grabbed her phone and called emergency services. Then she remembered to call the school and explain that neither she nor Coach Kane would be coming in today. Detectives Mann and Lucas sat side by side on the couch in Kat Kill's living room, declining the coffee she offered them. "I hope this won't take too long, Mrs. Kill," Detective Mann said. "Why did Coach Kane come to your house early this morning?" Kat blushed at the question. "He stayed the night," she replied quietly. The detectives exchanged glances, and then Mann asked the obvious question. "Did you have a sexual relationship with Coach Kane?" Kat nodded, tears streaming from her eyes. How long were you in a relationship with Coach Kane?" "About 9 months," Kat replied in a whisper. "Does your husband live here now?" asked Detective Lucas, the female detective. My husband is serving at Humphrey Camp in Korea, Kat sobbed. He's supposed to retire in 3 months and come home. At that point, Kat paused the interview to take a few deep breaths. Does he know about your relationship with Coach Kane? Oh no, he must never find out about my affair. It would kill him. He must not find out about this situation, Kat pleaded. Mrs. Kill, we're going to have to question your husband. He looks very upset after leaving the house that belongs to you. It's absolutely impossible to keep this situation a secret from him, Detective Lucas said. There was a long pause, and Kat burst into tears and left to collect her thoughts. When she returned with a box of tissues in her hands, the detectives resumed their questioning. Mrs. Kill, are you sure your husband is in Korea? He couldn't have returned to the U.S.? No, that's impossible. If Grant were in the U.S., he would be here. My husband loves me too much to leave our home. Kat took out her iPhone and tapped the screen. See, he's still in Korea. Apple's Find My Phone app clearly showed that her husband's phone was in Korea. Mann and Lucas looked at each other thinking the same thing. It only proved that his phone was in Korea. Mrs. Kill, who else lives in this house? My son, Danny, Kat replied. Could he have attacked Coach Kane? Detective Mann asked. No, that's impossible. I heard his car leave about 30 minutes before Randy was attacked, and I know he was at a school meeting at the time. My son had a good relationship with Randy. He was Danny's football coach. Detective Mann knew that Randy Kane was Danny's football coach. Ferguson's state championship victory was a huge event for the town, and Danny's performance had already become legendary. Mann had been at the game and saw Kat kissing Randy in the stands. Everyone thought she was the coach's wife or girlfriend. No one knew she was married to another man. Did your son know about your relationship with Coach Kane? Lucas asked. Yes. At first he wasn't thrilled, but then he got over it. I explained to him that it wouldn't affect my marriage to his father, and he agreed. Hearing these words, Mann and Lucas exchanged glances. How deluded is this woman? Their eyes seemed to say. Mrs. Kill, I noticed you have a camera by the door. Can we see the footage? Kat looked at the detectives in surprise. I completely forgot about that. I have an app on my iPad. Kat took the device from the nightstand, tapped the screen a few times, and handed it to Detective Mann. Just press play. The detectives watched as Randy Kane left the Keel house and walked to his truck, where he apparently noticed a flat tire. Kane's pickup truck blocked their view, but as far as they could tell when he crouched down to look at the tire, a tall, thin figure rushed toward him from across the street. The figure was wearing a black hoodie, sunglasses, and a coronavirus mask. The attacker lowered the bat several times, then jumped on a bicycle and rode away, clutching the bat to his chest. There was nothing interesting in the video. It was impossible to determine whether the attacker was a man or a woman, let alone identify him. The video had been enhanced, but it was high-resolution footage, so there was probably nothing of interest there. Mann asked and received permission from Kat to send the video to his police email address. Mrs. Kill! Detective Mann began placing special emphasis on the word Mrs. Can you think of anyone who might have had a motive for such a vicious attack on Coach Kane? No, Kat sobbed. I can't think of anyone who would do something so terrible. I don't understand why anyone would attack Randy. He didn't deserve it. Grant Kill sat at the dining room table in his brother's house filling out paperwork. His divorce lawyer had requested when the doorbell rang. Betty Lou, his sister-in-law, answered the door and called out to Grant that he had visitors. When he approached the door, he saw two people, a man and a woman with badges identifying them as detectives from the Ferguson Police Department. May we come in? The man asked. Grant looked at Betty Lou, who shrugged, so he invited the police officers in and led them into the living room. The detectives looked at the tall, slender woman and were taken aback. Betty Lou Kill was under 6 feet tall and weighed about 150 pounds. Her raven hair was styled in a stylish, asymmetrical cut that was longer on the right side than on the left. A gray streak ran across her forehead on the right, accentuating the piercing blue of her eyes. Her nose was slightly off-center, as if it had been broken more than once, and a faint 2-inch scar ran from her left eye to her lip. She was an attractive woman. Grant Kill was also an impressive man. Grant was over 6 feet tall and weighed 180 pounds, but during the investigation, the detectives discovered that he was not a runner but a fencer. This hobby had taken him to the 2000 Olympic Games in Sydney, and he was still actively involved in the sport. Kill's dark hair was beginning to gray at the temples, and his blue eyes were kind but sad. Detective Lucas felt herself responding to Grant Kill. "How should I address you, Miss Troy? Kill or Lieutenant Colonel Kill?" asked the man who introduced himself as Detective Mann. "Mr. Kill will do, or you can call me Grant, or Colonel. I was recently promoted to Colonel, but I don't usually bother with formalities." "Promoted? As we understand it, you're retiring," Detective Mann said. "From active duty. I'm in the reserves. Monthly meetings and 2 weeks in the summer." "I hope I can hang on long enough to get my star," Grant replied. Detective Lucas nodded. Very nice, she thought. Brenda Lucas had served in the Army as a military police officer and had risen to the rank of E4. The man standing in front of her was an Olympic medalist, a lawyer, a colonel, and aspiring to become a brigadier general. "Cat Kill is a damn idiot," she thought. "Let's leave Mr. Kill alone for now. I'm sure you know why we're here." "I have a pretty good idea," Grant replied. "Someone beat the man who slept with my wife half to death, and you think it was me." "Was it you?" asked the woman, introducing herself as Detective Lucas. "Whatever I say, I'll still be considered a suspect, so I'd rather not say anything," Grant replied. "Can you tell us where you were 3 days ago at 7:30 in the morning?" "At 7:30? I was working out with my brother. He combined several bedrooms into one large room and turned it into a gym, so every morning we work out together from 7:30 to 8:30. After that, he takes a shower, goes to his home office, and logs onto the network as he works remotely. I go to the guest room, take a shower, and then get started on whatever I'm working on." "Besides your brother, were there any other witnesses?" Detective Mann asked. "No, just him. Betty Lou, my sister-in-law, leaves the house before work, so it's just the two of us." "When was the last time you were at your house? The one where your wife and son live and where Randy Kane was attacked?" "About a week ago," Grant replied. "I stopped by when no one was home to pick up some clothes and some documents from the archives. I didn't touch my wife's or Coach Kane's things." "Did you know they were having an affair?" Detective Lucas asked. "Yes." "You seemed pretty calm and detached." "I've come to terms with her behavior and the end of our marriage. It is what it is." "About 2 hours ago, she thought you were still serving in the military in Korea. When we told her that you left Korea a month ago and are living with your brother, she didn't believe us. She saw that you were still serving at Camp Humphreys. She called your office and was told that you left Korea several weeks ago. When she found out, your wife had a nervous breakdown. Hysteria, screaming, the whole book. We had to call an ambulance and the medics calmed her down." Grant shrugged. "I'd say she's Coach Kane's problem and he should take care of her, but from what I've read about his condition, he's not in a position to do that." "And where was I?" "I forgot my cell phone and left it charging at the office. The officer who was covering for me sent it to me." The detectives looked skeptical, and Detective Mann said, "Very convenient, isn't it?" Grant shrugged again and ignored the question. Grant's brother, Leland, came out of his home office for a moment and stopped when he saw Grant talking to the detectives. "Do they think you did it?" Leland asked. Grant nodded. "They haven't charged me yet, but they're starting to push me. They'll ask how I found out my wife was cheating on me and why I didn't tell her I was back in Ferguson. Then they'll probably ask about my alibi, and then they'll try to arrest me for aggravated assault until they realize they don't have any evidence or a case. Then they'll get angry at me and tell me not to leave town, and then they'll start harassing someone else." "Sounds about right," Leland agreed. The two detectives looked suspiciously at Grant and Leland, who were quietly discussing what to do, turning their heads from side to side as if watching a tennis match, while Betty Lou Kill was having fun. How do you know what we're thinking?" Detective Mann asked, looking at them suspiciously. "I was a military prosecutor. I've handled more investigations than you can imagine. My brother was a military criminal investigator before he retired and started his own security company. We know what you're thinking before you even think it." An annoyed expression appeared on Detective Mann's face at the thought that his plan was so easy to read. "If you know all the questions, then please answer them." Grant looked sternly at Mann. "I found out about my wife's infidelity because I saw her kissing Kane after the state championship. I'm sure you saw the video." Mann nodded. He had seen the video of the kiss. Everyone thought it was Randy Kane's girlfriend, but after the attack it became clear who she was. I didn't tell her I was back in Ferguson because I don't want to see her. I'm working with a divorce lawyer and I don't want to hear her make excuses for her actions or blame me. What about your son? Man asked. Well, you haven't been in touch with him either? Did you see how he was with Kane and my wife? Yes, he didn't seem bothered by it. Grant nodded. I guess we're done here, right? So, Detective Lucas said, do you have an alibi? Should I show them the recordings? Leland Kill asked. Grant nodded. I think now is a good time. What recordings? What's on them? Leland left for a moment and returned with an iPad. He pointed the remote control at the 60-inch flat screen built into the wall. When the TV turned on, he transferred the image from the iPad to the TV screen and pressed play. I have cameras installed throughout my house, including the hallway, front door, and backyard. This is video from this morning. Footage from 6 different cameras appeared on the TV screen. The camera at the front door was pointed at the street, another camera was pointed at the backyard, and a third camera was in the garage. The remaining 3 cameras showed the kitchen, living room, and hallway where the bedrooms were located. These images were taken at 7:22 a.m. They saw Betty Lou come out of her bedroom wearing a white blouse, black pencil skirt, and black high heels. She was dressed for work as the financial director of a medical company. The camera captured her walking down the hallway and lost her when she reached the end of the hallway. Then a camera in the living room captured her crossing the room, after which a camera in the kitchen lost her and then captured her again. That camera lost her when she left the house and entered the garage. The dark garage was suddenly illuminated when the garage door opened, and cameras captured her getting into her Lexus SUV. Betty Lou drove out of the garage, and the camera followed her SUV onto the street. At the same time, the camera at the front door captured a side view of her car pulling out onto the street before the garage door closed. Pressing pause, Leland stopped the image. Judging by the time the picture was taken at 7:25 a.m., Leland then tapped the screen several times, moving the image to 7:28. That's me and Grant. They watched the video of Grant and Leland approaching the room from different sides of the hallway. Grant was wearing a red hoodie and red sweatpants, and Leland was dressed the same, a red hoodie and red sweatpants. I'm coming from my bedroom and Grant is coming from the guest room, Leland explained. Grant entered the room first, followed by Leland. We can sit here and stare at an empty room for an hour, or I can fast forward an hour, it's up to you, Leland said, looking at the 2 detectives. Fast forward, Detective Man said. Leland tapped the screen several times and paused when Grant and Leland left the room at 8:26. They had been studying for 58 minutes. This is yesterday's video, Leland said. The video was almost identical to today's, except that the time was shifted by a couple of minutes, and instead of a pencil skirt, Betty Lou was wearing a stylish feminine black pantsuit with heels. Grant and Leland re-entered the gym from opposite ends and met at the door of the home gym in identical sweatshirts, this time gray. They spent another hour in the gym. Leland tapped the iPad screen several times, opening another screen. It's the same recording, but taken this morning when that jerk was attacked. They saw Betty Lou come out of her bedroom again, but instead of her work clothes, she was wearing workout clothes consisting of a thin black hoodie, black sweatpants, and white tennis shoes. I took the day off to work out because I have a triathlon in a couple of weeks. Today was bike day, and I rode the bike path around Ferguson Park 4 times, Betty Lou explained. They watched Betty Lou drive out of the garage in her SUV and noticed that this time the bikes were in a rack attached to the back of the car. Continuing to watch the recording, they saw Leland come out of his bedroom wearing a black hoodie and black sweatpants. And a few seconds later, Grant came out of the guest room also wearing a black hoodie and black sweatpants. The detectives looked at each other in disbelief. Are you kidding me? Detective Lucas asked. Are you 3 serious? Do you really expect us to believe that it's a complete coincidence that the 3 of you are dressed the same as the man who attacked Kane on the day of the attack? Leland and Grant shrugged simultaneously. Let the tape speak for itself, Grant replied. Leland said, I'm not going to rewind the tape, but I'll play it back at double speed so you can watch. But before I do, would you like some coffee or anything else? Even at double speed, we'll be sitting here for half an hour warming up our fingers. After handing everyone a cup of coffee, Leland pressed play again, and all 5 watched the countdown. 25 minutes later, Leland stopped the video and played it at normal speed. The brothers left the gym at 8:31 and headed to their rooms, still in their tracksuits. So the day has come. As you can see, none of us left the room. I'll give you the recordings without a warrant. Can you show us the gym? The detectives didn't seem convinced by Grant's alibi. Sure, Leland said. The police followed him into the hallway, looking over his shoulder at the dark ball that concealed the camera mounted on the ceiling and filming the gym. They looked around the room that housed the gym, then looked at each other. The home gym was a large room formed by combining 3 bedrooms and removing closets and storage areas. Half of the room was filled with free weights, benches, a large set of dumbbells, and kettlebells. There was also a rowing machine and an elliptical trainer. The other half of the room had been converted into a small dojo. Shelves were built into one of the walls, displaying several trophies. There were also framed photos of Leland and Betty Lou fighting opponents in the ring in mixed martial arts. In one of the photos, Betty Lou Kill was pictured with the referee's hand raised in victory, while her opponent stood frozen, supported by her coach. Betty Lou's left eye was swollen and bruised, and her nose appeared to be broken and slightly displaced. Wow, Detective Lucas said quietly and slowly, looking admiringly at the photo of Betty Lou. Your wife is tough. Of course she is, Leland Kill replied. And not just for that reason, he added, waving his hand toward the photos and trophies. She is very devoted to her family and friends and is the best woman I have ever known. She is one of a kind, and I will never tire of telling her that. Grant nodded sadly. He had once thought the same thing about his wife, but looking back, he realized that Kat had never been like Betty Lou. She had never had that kind of devotion. What about the windows? Detective Lucas asked. The room had simple windows with wooden shutters, which were currently open. Are you asking if I could have slipped out during practice and attacked Coach Kane? Grant asked. You could have, or he could have, Detective Mann said, pointing first at Grant and then at Leland. That's true, Leland said, but we didn't do it. Can you prove it? Can you prove you didn't slip away? Detective Lucas asked aggressively. Detective, Leland said, that's not the question. Yes? What is the question? Detective Lucas asked, clearly annoyed. The question is, can you prove that we actually ran away? Grant replied. I'll take you both out, Leland added. Colonel Cardwell, how can I help you? Colonel Cardwell, I understand you're in charge of military justice at Camp Humphreys? That's correct. Who are you, please? Colonel, my name is Detective Brenda Lucas from the Ferguson Police Department in Texas. I'm calling about your predecessor, Colonel Grant Kill. Yes, how's Grant? When I last saw him, he was fine. Colonel Cardwell, Colonel Kill told us he left his cell phone in his office in Korea. Yes, he did. It was in a charger on the dresser in what used to be his office. I didn't know where to send it, so I kept it. A few days ago, he called me and gave me an address to send the phone to, which I did. Colonel, what day did he contact you and give you the address? Last Monday. He also asked me to answer any questions about him that the callers might ask. It sounds like Grant was expecting trouble, Colonel Cardwell said. Great, Lucas thought. On the day of the attack, when he no longer cared whether his wife found out he was in town, he returned his phone. Detective Lucas thanked Cardwell and immediately called Grant Kill. I spoke with Colonel Cardwell and she confirmed what you said about the cell phone. She also said she sent it to you. Colonel Cardwell is very efficient. If she said she sent it on a specific date, you can bet your pension on it. Colonel, I want to open this package myself. I want to see your cell phone before anyone else does. I don't have a warrant, and you have every right to refuse, but it will help prove your innocence. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Kip replied. I don't think I'll have a problem with that, as I have nothing to hide. I'll call you when it arrives. If she sent it on Monday, it should be here in a day or two. Investigating the area around Leland Keel's house, detectives discovered that a doorbell camera was installed on the house across the street from Leland Keel's house, pointing at Keel's house. When asked, the homeowner, Bobby Lee Gerson, confirmed that his doorbell camera recorded video and stored it in the cloud. The detectives felt they had made their first breakthrough in the investigation and sat down with Gerson to review the video footage. Since the houses were next to each other, Leland Kyle's doorbell camera was pointed at his own front door but only captured the side of Gerson's house. Gerson's camera, on the other hand, was angled to provide an excellent view of Keel's house. Bobby Lee Gerson was a fire captain and designed firefighting equipment. He held several patents and licensed his designs to several companies. He had a mechanical workshop attached to his house with a CNC table, milling equipment, and lathe and milling machines. He was divorced and into martial arts, with a black belt in karate. On the day of the attack on Randy Kane, clear video recordings were made of the entire kill house, including the windows of the home gym. At around 7:15 a.m., the video showed Bobby Lee Gerson dressed in a black hoodie, black sweatpants, and white tennis shoes, carrying gardening tools, including a rake, a hoe, and a shovel, from the garage to the porch. As they watched, Gerson leaned the tools against the wall where the doorbell camera was mounted. They watched in bewilderment as he leaned the shovel with the blade up and the handle down, rather than with the blade down and the handle up, as any normal person would have done. The shovel completely blocked the camera. This continued for over an hour until Gerson retrieved his tools and began spreading mulch around the house. "What did I just see?" Man shouted to Gerson. "He blocked the camera," Detective Lucas said anxiously. "I was about to start spreading the mulch, so I got my tools and leaned them against the wall, but then I felt a little nauseous. So I went back inside, sat down on the couch and rested. When I felt better, I went back outside and finished spreading the mulch." "And I suppose it's just a coincidence that you were wearing a black hoodie and black sweatpants?" Detective Lucas asked mockingly. "They must be very good friends for you to risk being accused of aiding and abetting," Man said bitterly. "Leland and Betty Lou? Well, Betty Lou is my sister, and I've known Leland and Grant for a long time, so sorry, what was the question?" As soon as Grant handed her the bag, Detective Lucas rummaged through the box to get Kill's iPhone, then pressed the power button. But nothing happened. "The battery is dead," Lucas thought. "Can I borrow it for a couple of days?" she asked. "Take your time," Grant replied. After charging the phone at the station, Lucas and Man gathered around it, waiting for it to boot up. Lucas had an iPhone, and she always glanced warily at Man's Android and the green text bubbles that appeared on the screen. Man leaned back in his chair and waited for his partner to finish. As soon as the phone turned on, it buzzed, downloading messages and missed calls. Lucas opened iMessage, Apple's built-in text messaging platform, and began scrolling through the list. There were the usual messages from Kat to her husband. The usual, "I love you and miss you," which was funny, knowing how openly she was cheating on him. After Kane's attack, the number of messages from Kat had increased, and she had sent a hell of a lot of them over the last few days as her situation began to catch up with her. There were a few messages from her brother, but the real surprise was the number of messages from Lynn Danaway. The detectives knew that Captain Danaway had worked with Grant in Korea and was now stationed at Fort Cavasios. The messages were friendly, with no hint of romance. They were mostly just interested in each other. He wanted to make sure she was settling in at her new place, and she wanted to make sure he was okay after finding out about his wife's infidelity. They also discussed how Kill had found out about his wife's infidelity in the most humiliating way possible. When everyone in the office saw his wife throw herself into her lover's arms and start kissing him in front of the entire school, oops. They read Danny's message to his father right after the game and Grant's reply. There were a few more messages like, "How's it going?" until they stumbled upon a video Danny had sent to his father, Uncle Leland, Aunt Betty Lou, and her brother Bobby Lee. In the video, Danny was standing in front of a mirror, and the date and time were marked a week before the attack. In the video, Danny says, "The rally with the signs will be next Monday at 9 a.m. I hope you can make it, but I understand if you're all too busy. Talk to you soon." Poor kid, the detectives thought. He looked so depressed, and his father's family disowned him for keeping his mother's affair a secret. "Explain this to me like I'm a 5-year-old, Man said. "He hasn't had a phone for over a month, but I can see that he's been responding to messages from his child and wife the whole time. What's going on?" Assuming he doesn't have another phone, he has an iPad or Mac synced to his iPhone via his iCloud account. He can respond to messages, and the other person doesn't know they're not coming from his iPhone. The iPhone's location shows Korea, but he's a mile away from his brother's house and sending them messages. "Damn, right," Detective Man replied. "His family thinks he's in Korea, and at the same time he's in town taking steps to file for divorce." "Yeah, but so what? What does that tell us?" "Nothing, except that we know he's a sneaky bastard." When Kat Kill woke up, she found herself in a hospital. For a moment, she couldn't remember what had happened to her, but then it all came back to her. Grant had been in town for several weeks, but hadn't tried to see her or Danny. The thought pierced her like physical pain. "I have to see Grant," she thought. I have to explain to him that my affair with Randy meant nothing, that it didn't affect our marriage. Kat began to cry, tears streaming down her face as she stared at the ceiling. She was still crying when Danny opened her bedroom door. Kat stood up and hugged her son. Mom, are you okay? Oh, Danny, your father is in town. The police think he attacked Randy. Why do they think it was Dad? The police said he's been here for 3 weeks, Kat exclaimed. That's bad. What have you done, Mom? I just need to talk to your father and explain everything to him. Your father loves us and our life. He won't give that up. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll take care of everything. Kat and Danny were talking about Grant and reminiscing about happy family holidays when there was a knock at Kat's door and Detectives Mann and Lucas entered the room. Just checking in on you, Mrs. Kill. You look much better than when we last spoke. I think I feel better after 2 days of sleep in a hospital bed. Have you seen my husband? Is Grant coming to see me? Her tone begged for good news, which they didn't have. We spoke to him this morning. I don't think you should expect him to visit. I need to talk to him. I need to explain to him that things aren't as bad as he thinks. He needs to understand that what happened between me and Randy doesn't mean anything. Detective Mann looked seriously annoyed, and Detective Lucas looked at Kat with sympathy. Both detectives' marriages had fallen apart because of infidelity. In Detective Mann's case, his wife had cheated on him with an ex-boyfriend from school and left him a note saying she was tired of being married to a cop. Detective Lucas's marriage had also fallen apart because of infidelity, but in her case, she had cheated on her husband, a college professor with a fellow police officer. They tried to reconcile, but Detective Lucas was unable to remain faithful and cheated on him again with the same colleague, resulting in her husband filing for divorce. Ironically, she sincerely loved her husband and was devastated when he filed for divorce. She blamed only herself and turned to a psychotherapist to find the reason for her destructive behavior. 3 years later, she was still seeing a psychotherapist every week. Since she had been sued, she had not been on a single date. She sympathized with Kat and could only recommend psychotherapy. Mrs. Kill, do you know how your husband found out about your affair? I suppose someone told him. No, ma'am. He said the state championship game was on the big screen at the military police office. All his employees were working that day and watching the game with him. After the game ended, you rushed into Coach Kane's arms, wrapped your legs around him, and started kissing him. His entire office watched it live. Kat looked at the detective in horror and shook her head. No, that couldn't have happened. I would have remembered if I had done something like that. It didn't happen. No, you're lying. Mom, Danny said. It really happened. Everyone saw it. I was standing right there and Dad was watching us, so he knows I knew about your affair. Detective Lucas watched as the realization dawned on Kat that her marriage was probably over. At that moment, there was a knock at the door, and a pot-bellied middle-aged man entered Kat's room carrying a large envelope. After greeting Danny and the two detectives, he asked if she was Catherine Kill. Excuse me, ma'am, he apologized, handing the envelope to Kat. This is for you, the stranger said, and without another word, turned and left. Kat handed the envelope to Danny and asked him to open it and tell her what was inside. Danny opened the sealed envelope by running his index finger under the flap and took out the contents, which he handed to Kat. Divorce papers. Detective Lucas ran out into the hallway looking for a nurse, while Danny frantically pressed the nurse call button, and Kat, rocking back and forth on the hospital bed, began to breathe heavily and make plaintive sounds. I'll show you everything, Grant Lynn Danaway said as they entered the empty office. So you're buying the whole building? She asked, looking around the room and peeking into each office. I think I'll take it. The space had been a lawyer's office for many years until he grew old and put the building up for sale. There was enough room for 3 lawyers, several assistants, a couple of secretaries, and an administrator. There were large and small conference rooms, men's and women's restrooms, and a kitchenette. Lynn was impressed. Wait until you see the second floor, Grant said with a smile. Grant Kill was very happy to see Lynn Danaway. In the months since he had learned of his wife's infidelity, they had spoken on the phone at least 3 times a week, and she had been an invaluable source of support. During their time together in Korea, Grant had never seen her as anything other than Captain Danaway. He knew that the blonde-haired, green-eyed Lynn Danaway was objectively very beautiful, something she didn't notice herself when she was in uniform. But standing in the empty offices of the building he was about to buy, Grant could see how beautiful she was. They climbed the stairs to the second floor, which led them to a small lobby with two doors facing each other. Grant opened both doors and stepped aside so Lynn could enter one of them. And when she entered the room, he heard her sigh. The entire second floor of the building was occupied by two apartments, one measuring 3,000 square feet, the other 1,500 square feet. Both apartments had been completely renovated a few years ago. Modern bathrooms and kitchens, 15-foot plaster ceilings with intricate moldings. But what made Lynn gasp was the view of Lake Ray Ferguson from almost every room in the apartment. Unlike many cities that had redeveloped their downtown areas with shops and restaurants, Ferguson never needed to. The town square was located one block from the lake named after the city's founder. Shops and restaurants had always occupied the ground floors of buildings on the town square. And when the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers built the lake as part of Roosevelt's WPA program, the town center, which had always been a lively and prosperous area, became even more vibrant as the lake was only a few meters away. The building Grant was planning to buy was on the corner of a street leading to the town square, with one side facing the avenue leading to the lake and the back facing the lake and the waterfront, where there were even more shops and restaurants. They entered the second, smaller apartment, and Lynn was amazed. It had been renovated at the same time as the larger apartment and had the same view of the lake. "Can you afford it?" Lynn asked anxiously. "I got half of my parents' inheritance when they passed away a few years ago. That money was put into my Fidelity account, and those funds were never mixed with our joint assets. They should be excluded from my prenuptial agreement. There's more than enough money in that account to pay for the building in cash. Are you ready to be a homeowner?" Grant shrugged in response to her question. In addition to the law office and the huge apartments that occupied the entire second floor of the building, the first floor housed a snack bar open for breakfast and lunch, a Lily Pulitzer boutique, and an Irish pub that served excellent food and featured Irish and Celtic folk bands on Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday evenings. "I'm so jealous of you," Lynn smiled. "It seems like you found a gold mine at the worst possible moment in your life. Actually, I have an ulterior motive for inviting you here. How would you feel about becoming partners in a new law firm?" Lynn looked at Grant in surprise. "Really? You want me to quit my job and move to Ferguson? I don't even know what to say. Think about it. You'll get a second apartment for free. We'll be Keel and Dunaway, attorneys at law. I don't expect an answer right now, but think about it, Lynn." Lynn walked through the second apartment again, looking around and especially admiring the view of the lake. The apartment was 140 square meters, and Grant knew it was the same size as the house she was currently renting in Kalani, Texas, near Fort Cavazos. Watching Lynn run her hands over the stone countertop in the kitchen as she looked out at the lake, he noticed a pensive expression on her face. "What do you mean their insurance company told you to remove the sand?" Randy Kane muttered. Randy Kane muttered to his lawyer. He wanted to scream, but it was too painful. Even whispering was agonizing. 2 days ago, Randy had most of the wire that had been held in place for nearly 8 weeks removed from his jaw. There were still several pins and screws in his jaw, and the clicking sounds coming from his jaw joint were driving him crazy. Any food or liquid that was too hot or too cold caused pain in his head. The staples were removed from his knees and elbows, but pins and screws remained in each joint, where they would remain for the rest of his life. So severe was the trauma he had suffered in the attack. Randy's insurance was about to expire, and he would have to live on his own for several months, maybe even years. He needed help even to go to the bathroom, and he would need it for several more months. They refused to take responsibility. "You were attacked on the street, not on Keela's property. No one has been charged with the attack, and the investigation is ongoing. If any of your family members are found guilty of assaulting you, we can hold them liable because the Keela home insurance policy has a $1 million deductible. But that's only if one of his family members is convicted." Todd Blair went to high school with Randy Kane and thought he was a real jerk back then. Time hasn't changed his opinion of Kane. Realizing that he ended up in this situation because he slept with another man's wife has only reinforced Todd's low opinion of Kane. "How's the police investigation going? Every time I call Mann or Lucas, they brush me off. Only then do they bother to call back," Randy muttered bitterly. Todd rubbed his temples, staring at the speakerphone. He hoped the detectives had talked to Randy, but apparently they weren't in a hurry to give him any news. Todd sighed. "The investigation is over. I met with detectives Mann and Lucas yesterday. And, Randy asked impatiently. And you're not going to like it, Todd said. Detectives Mann and Lucas had completed their investigation, and the meeting with the district attorney had not gone well. You say you're certain Grant Kill committed the assault? He asked. No, Mann replied. We know he did it. But you can't prove it? The district attorney asked. Mann and Lucas exchanged glances, unhappy that the conversation had taken this turn. It looks like it could have been his brother, the district attorney remarked. The detectives reluctantly agreed. Damn, it could have been the brother's wife. The district attorney checked the name in the file and said, Betty Lou, or even Betty Lou's brother, Bobby Lee Gerson. Both detectives nodded grimly. You both know that the purpose of a criminal investigation is to narrow down the circle of suspects, not to keep expanding it. Conduct another investigation and you'll have half of Ferguson on the suspect list. The detectives looked at each other grimly, then at the district attorney, who shook his head. Yeah, I'm sorry, detectives, but if that's all you have, the answer is no. There's no way I'm going to press charges or go to court with this dog case. Even a first-year law student could get the charges dropped. Come back when you have something concrete. Mann and Dunn returned to the Ferguson police station and reported the results of their meeting with the district attorney to the assistant police chief with their heads bowed. The district attorney assigned them a new case, transferring the Randy Kane assault case to the open and unsolved file. Kat did not resist the divorce. Her lawyer advised her that it would be a waste of time. Her affair had been so public and humiliating to her husband that no judge would insist on counseling. The best option for her was to agree to the divorce and, over time, try to repair her relationship with her husband and repair the damage done to her son by forcing him to hide her infidelity from his father. Grant was fair in the divorce. Kat got the house, and Grant paid off the mortgage. In addition, Kat was entitled to a portion of his military pension. The calculation was based on the fact that they had been married for 20 of Grant's 25 years in the military, so she received less than half. Grant wanted to take a few pieces of furniture from the house, but nothing more than tools and clothes. Finally, it was time to talk. Grant wasn't in the mood, but he knew Kat needed it and was ready to make one last gesture. They met in the conference room at his lawyer's office. Grant, I know what you think of me, and as cruel as those feelings are and as repulsed as I am by you, please know that I am more repulsed and horrified by my behavior than you could ever imagine. I have no excuses, and I can't say anything that would mitigate my actions. I hope that one day you can forgive me and be in the same room with me. Grant looked at his now ex-wife. Kat, I loved you. Hell, I still love you despite everything you've done. But every day I learn to love you less. I hear you talk about your feelings, but to me, they're just empty words. I don't wish you any harm, but I don't wish you any good either. I want you out of my life as soon as possible. I know we'll have to communicate because we have a son together and there will be events that we'll both be involved in, but if I had a choice, I'd rather never see you or speak to you again for the rest of my life. Kat cried when she heard Grant's words. She understood his anger and pain, but she had one last request for her soon-to-be ex-husband. Grant, please do this one last thing for me now that our marriage is over. Please look at Danny. He misses his father. It hurts me so much that you haven't seen him since you came back. Please look at your son and talk to him. Grant nodded, turned, and left the room to talk to his lawyer. There must be something I can do, Randy whined. I can't coach and I can't teach? I can barely wipe my own ass. I'm almost broke and my insurance is running out. What am I going to do? Oh, Jay Simpson, Todd said. What the hell are you talking about? Randy asked. Remember how the jury acquitted O.J. Simpson of murdering his wife and that Goldman guy? Yeah, so what? The Goldman family sued O.J. for compensation. In civil court, there isn't the same burden of proof as in criminal court, and the family won millions. O.J. didn't have any money, but they took everything he had. And now the court of public opinion considers O.J. guilty. Are you suggesting that I sue Grant Kill? I don't know. I think it's your choice. It's up to you. Will you take the case? Todd Blair shook his head quickly. No. He didn't want anything to do with that jerk. I'm completely booked, but I can recommend someone. Maybe it will be more suited to his qualifications. After the divorce, everyone gathered at Grant's apartment. His brother Leland, Leland's wife Betty Lou, Betty Lou's brother Bobby Lee Gerson, Lynn Danaway and Grant were chatting in the living room of Grant's apartment above his law office when the doorbell rang downstairs. Grant opened the camera app, recognized the visitor, opened the door, and walked to the door of his apartment to wait for the guest who knocked a minute later. Seeing his son standing in the hallway, Grant hugged him and then pushed him away at arm's length, taking him by the shoulders. "You look good, son," Grant said. "You too, Dad," Danny replied. Danny followed his father into the living room and greeted his aunt, uncle, and step-uncle with a smile. He wasn't familiar with Lynn, but he knew who she was. Everyone looked at Danny silently. "A baseball bat? Didn't we agree to keep it down?" Betty Lou asked. Danny looked at Lynn, who replied, "I knew about it back in Korea. As soon as you wrote to your father about their affair, I found out within 10 minutes." As soon as Danny found out that his mother was cheating on his father, he wrote to his father about it. He kept his father informed of everything that was going on. They deleted their messages to hide the fact of the affair, hoping that it would never come to light. The plan was to simply leave the service and divorce Kat, but everything changed. Kane started pressuring Danny not to go to West Point, and the level of disrespect Kane showed toward the Grant family increased dramatically. After Kane appeared naked in front of Danny in his own home, got out of Kat's bed, and then attacked Danny in his own home, Danny wanted revenge. Some people quote an old proverb that if you embark on a path of revenge, dig 2 graves first. Grant thought this was absolute nonsense. He preferred Francis Bacon's saying, "Revenge is a form of wild justice," although he knew that Bacon was not advocating revenge, but rather the opposite. Nevertheless, Grant felt that there was a certain cathartic healing power in showing cruelty to those who had hurt you deeply. He didn't want to deprive his son of his right to wild justice. So Grant agreed with Danny's plan to end his mother's affair without destroying his relationship with her. It had long been decided that Danny would stay away from his father and his family until the divorce was finalized and the police investigation was over. Danny shrugged apologetically. "It just came out. All the comments about him being my stepfather. I could hardly restrain myself from attacking him. I knew I couldn't handle him one-on-one. His kick showed me how fast and strong he was. I couldn't beat him that way, but..." Danny faltered, remembering how he had brought the bat down on Coach Kane's back. He hated being attacked from behind, but otherwise the much larger man would have beaten him to a pulp. "When I was fixing your bike, you were as calm as a cucumber. When I read how you knocked that piece of shit out, I thought, yeah, he's definitely Kill. He acts just like his father and uncle." Betty Lou looked at Lynn, who was sipping her wine and listening intently to the conversation. "Are you sure you want to have anything to do with that family?" Lynn smiled and took a sip of wine. Later, after the guests had left, Grant sat down on the sofa next to Lynn, their shoulders and hips touching. "Well, partner," she began, "I'm glad that's over. Now we can focus on growing our practice and other things." She smiled at Grant and he smiled back. While he was married, Grant had refused to show his feelings for Lynn. Now that the divorce was final, he could step out of limbo and give free rein to his feelings for the person who had supported him for so long. The next morning, Grant was sitting in his office reviewing a will that one of his clients had asked him to draft when the sound of the door opening signaled that someone had entered the Keel and Dunaway law office. Lynn came out of her office and joined Grant in the reception area. They didn't have a secretary yet. "How can we help you?" Lynn asked the burly, middle-aged man. "I'm looking for Grant Keel," the man replied. "That's me," Grant said, extending his hand. Instead, the man handed Grant an envelope. "This is for you," the man said apologetically, then turned and left the office. Roland Cruz stared at the broken man sitting across from him. He knew all about the attack on the former head coach of the Ferguson Wildcats. After the attack, Kane was fired from the Ferguson School District because of his open affair with a married teacher, who also lost her job. Cruz knew he had a reputation for not being able to work with the lower classes. When Raleigh entered the courtroom with his client, most of the judges automatically assumed his client was at least partly to blame before the trial even began. "So you're having an affair with this guy's wife and her son knows about it and doesn't mind? Is that right?" Randy nodded. "I know it sounds crazy, but Danny Keene and I had a very good relationship." "You say had, as if it's in the past. Don't you have a good relationship now?" "He hasn't called or visited me since I was attacked," Randy said bitterly. "Not once. And I was like a father to him." Raleigh Cruz shook his head, imagining the pile of dog shit Randy Kane had brought him a few weeks ago. It had been almost 6 months since the attack. Randy was desperate for money, and the lawsuit against Grant Kill was his only way out. The police investigation had led nowhere. They were certain that Grant Keel had attacked Randy Kane, but they couldn't prove it. And the Keel family had muddied the waters so badly that no jury would have convicted him. There wasn't even circumstantial evidence linking Grant Kill to the attack, let alone hard evidence. The bat used to hit him was never found, and the whole adventure with the Black Hoods that day only proved that they were despicable bastards. So Raleigh was left to try to figure out what the hell was going on. He requested and obtained copies of all the evidence the police had, and now he was studying it, trying to understand what the hell had happened. By all accounts, Catherine "Cat" Kill had been a faithful and loving wife for 20 years. Her family had been stationed at various military bases in the US and Europe, and during that time there had never been the slightest hint of an affair or inappropriate behavior. When her husband was sent to Korea, something changed. Since Korea was considered a difficult place to serve, his family could only accompany him if he signed a 2-year contract. Otherwise, his tour of duty would be 12 months. This meant that Danny would not be able to play football in his senior year. After much discussion, it was decided that the Keys would buy a house in Grant's hometown of Ferguson, and Danny would attend Ferguson High School, while Kat would try to find a job as a science teacher, a position she had held in various capacities. During her marriage, shortly after her husband left for Korea, Kat fell in love with a handsome man who was twice divorced and 10 years younger than her football coach. She had been having an affair with Kane for several months, and her son knew about it. What's more, the whole school suspected that something was going on between them. Grant Kill found out about the affair and moved to Ferguson after being discharged from the army. He didn't tell his wife or son about his move and stayed with his brother. Grant Kill, his brother, and his sister-in-law avoided Cat Kill and their son the entire time. While Raleigh studied all the evidence and reviewed all the records, an idea began to form in his mind. Leland, Betty Lou, Bobby Lee, Lynn, and Grant got together again, this time joined by Danny. Everyone except Lynn was served with a notice that they were being charged as participants in a conspiracy to assault Randall Kane Jr., which left him disabled and unable to work. The plaintiff was seeking $10,000 in compensation for actual damages and pain and suffering. "How bad is this?" Bobby Lee asked Gerson. Grant shrugged. "Juries in civil cases don't have the same burden of proof as juries in criminal cases. In criminal cases, the prosecutor has to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. In civil cases, the plaintiff has to prove that it could have happened. Listen, I'm not going to take you to court. This is my problem, mine and Danny's. I'll meet with Kane and his lawyer and agree to a settlement if the lawsuit against the three of you is dropped." "Bullshit," Betty Lou replied sharply. "We're family. We stick together. Lynn will defend us and kick their asses." "Agreed?" Leland and Bobby Lee agreed immediately. Bobby Lee wasn't related by blood, but he had known Grant and Leland since elementary school. When his best friend Leland married his sister Betty Lou, it was one of the happiest days of his life. "So it's settled?" Leland asked. "We're going to tell Roland Cruz to go to hell?" Everyone agreed. In his opening statement, Raleigh Cruz explained his strategy to the jury. He was going to prove to them that Grant Kill's friends and family had conspired to attack Randy Kane and then cover up the attack. He went on to explain that although the police could not prove with certainty which of the conspirators had attacked Randy, they had all participated in the conspiracy and should be held accountable. Lynn's arguments were simple. The police did not have enough evidence to charge anyone, and Randy Kane's lawsuit was a desperate attempt to break up the family of a man he had hurt badly by having an affair with his wife. Cruz's first witnesses were predictable. He called the paramedics and various medical professionals who treated Kane to describe in detail the extent of Kane's injuries from the attack. The opportunities for cross-examination were very limited, as Kane's injuries were obvious. They were not self-inflicted, although this option was discussed, but it was ultimately decided that it would be difficult to convince a jury that Kane had repeatedly hit himself in the face and testicles with a baseball bat, but were inflicted by someone who harbored a personal grudge against Kane. Cruz then called law enforcement officers who responded to Kat's 911 call. They confirmed that the crime scene matched Cruz's description in his opening statement. Cruz then called Catherine Kill to testify. Kat confirmed that she had been having an affair with Randy Kane and that the affair had lasted several months. She stated that Kane had told her that he loved her and wanted her to divorce her husband so they could be together. She denied that she was in love with Kane, although she admitted that she loved him very much. She knew that Kane had made some inappropriate comments to Danny, but she understood from Randy that these were locker room talk and that Danny was not bothered by them. Finally, she admitted that she knew that Randy had gotten into a minor fight with her son and that Randy had to use force to calm Danny down. She also admitted that she was under the impression that her husband was in Korea at the time of the attack on Randy and was unaware of her infidelity. When she was told that Grant had been in Ferguson for several weeks and knew about her infidelity, she had a nervous breakdown that required hospitalization. Lynn's cross-examination devastated Kat. Mrs. Kill, why did you decide to commit adultery with the plaintiff, Randy Kane? Adultery, Cruz shouted. The term adultery is prejudicial to my client, Your Honor. That may be true, Mr. Cruz, but it is a factual term, and I will allow its use, the judge said. Mrs. Kill, please answer the question, Lynn said. I had no good reason. My husband is a wonderful man. He is smart, handsome, athletic, and loved me very much. But I was weak, vain, and insecure. At the time, I was about to turn 42. My son was about to leave home and go to college. My husband was serving thousands of miles away, and I was lonely. Coach Kane was a handsome, pleasant conversationalist. All the female students and teachers were in love with him, and I was flattered that this guy 10 years younger than me was courting me. He knew what to say to break through my defenses. I fell for his charm. Kat paused to collect her thoughts. Lynn brought her a box of tissues from the defendant's table and waited for Kat to nod that she was ready. I've learned a lot over the past few months. Now I know how to protect myself from predators like Randy Kane, Kat declared. Objection! Cruz exclaimed, jumping to his feet. Mr. Kane's case is not on trial today, and the characterization of him as a predator by the witness is false and inflammatory. I move to strike it from the record and warn the witness not to make such statements again. The judge looked at Kane before responding to Cruz's objection. The question of whether that term is false will be considered on another day. However, I agree that the term is provocative. But, counsel, it's almost laughable to point this out, but Mrs. Kill is your witness. You called her, not the defendant's. Objection overruled. Blushing with embarrassment, Cruz sat down angrily next to Kane. Mrs. Kill, Lynn began, do you believe it is possible that any of the defendants attacked Coach Randy Kane? Kat looked at the table where her husband, son, and 3 other defendants were sitting. She shook her head firmly. No. I refuse to believe that they were so enraged that they would do anything other than what I know they did. Tears streamed down Kat's face. If they were so enraged that they attacked Randy, then I know they are lost to me forever. Kat raised her hands to her face and sobbed pitifully in court. The next witness was the lead detective who investigated the attack on Randy Kane. Please state your name, place of employment, and position to the jury, Roland Cruz said to the man after he had been sworn in. My name is Kenneth Mann. I am a detective with the Ferguson Township Police Department. Thank you, detective. How long have you been with the Ferguson Township Police Department? 22 years. 15 years as a patrol officer, the last 7 as a detective. Detective, can you tell the jury about the events of that morning? My partner, Detective Brenda Lucas, and I were investigating a report of a carjacking when dispatch sent us to an address where an assault had reportedly taken place. We arrived at 1212 Conway Lane and found a man who appeared to be in a very bad shape. He was being assisted by the homeowner, Catherine Kill. Paramedics had not yet arrived, but we were told they were on their way. Detective Mann, in your professional opinion, what could have caused the injuries you saw on Mr. Kane? A club. Something similar to a baseball bat. Roland then asked Mann to tell the jury about the investigation, starting with his conversation with Kath Kill. So Mrs. Kill didn't know her husband was in Ferguson? No, she didn't. She thought her husband was still in Korea. It wasn't until a few days later when I tried to contact him in Korea that I found out he had returned home to Ferguson. Didn't you find it strange that he was in Ferguson but couldn't contact his wife and son? You could say that, Detective Mann replied dryly. It was cause for concern. You questioned Mr. Kill at his brother's house, didn't you? Yes. Did Mr. Kill know about his wife's affair? He said he did. How did Mr. Kill find out about his wife's affair? Cruz asked. He said that while watching the school championship, he saw his wife kissing Coach Kane. From the video, he realized that his son knew about his wife's affair. Detective Mann, did Mr. Keel say that was when he found out about his wife's infidelity? Mann thought for a moment before answering. No, he didn't say that now that you mention it. He avoided lying by evading the question and I didn't catch him. Mann looked embarrassed after that admission. Roll then presented the surveillance footage from Leland and Betty Lou Keel's home and played it back for the jury. Detective Mann, as the professional police officer, what do you think of this footage? At first glance, they look perfectly normal. On the one hand, these are ordinary everyday activities that are repeated every day with minor variations. On the other hand, the kills are very smart. They try to sow doubt and confuse any investigation that might look into their activities. Did you ask them about this? Cruz asked. I did, several times. And every time they said the same thing. The video speaks for itself. Roland then showed Cruz the recording from Bobby Lee Gerson's doorbell camera. In your professional opinion, what is the significance of this video? Cruz asked. The same as Kyle's video. At first glance, it looks honest, but in fact, there are many hints that end with Mr. Gerson turning off the only camera watching Kyle's house. Didn't that seem suspicious to you? Mann smiled sarcastically. Everything these four men did seemed suspicious to me, and now there are 5 of them, plus a son. And when you asked Mr. Gerson about this, what did he say? I asked him. He followed Killa's playbook. He said, the video speaks for itself. The last thing shown was the video Danny sent to his relatives to tell them about the time of the rally and his support. What do you think of this video, detective? I felt sorry for the guy. He turned to his relatives and they all turned their backs on him because he knew about his mother's affair with the coach and didn't tell anyone about it. When did Danny Keel send the video to his family? Cruz asked. A week before the attack on Coach Kane. Did you notice what Danny Keel was wearing in the video? A black hoodie and dark jeans. It seems like everyone in his family wears black hoodies, Mann remarked dryly, and the jury chuckled at the witness's testimony. During the investigation, did you check whether Danny Keel was at the rally on the day of the attack on Coach Kane? I checked that fact. How did you check that? Cruz asked. I asked the school principal. He confirmed that Danny was there the whole time helping him because he, the principal, had to fill in for Coach Kane while he was away. You can also verify that Danny was there by going to the Ferguson newspaper website, Roland said, handing Mann a copy of the newspaper. On the front page was a large photo of the football team at the rally. Danny was standing next to the school principal. Detective Mann, can you describe what Danny Keel is wearing in this photo? The jury saw Mann's eyes widen and his mouth open as he sat, stunned, staring at the newspaper. He's wearing a black hoodie and dark jeans, just like the rest of his family that day. Did you check what Danny Keel was doing in the period leading up to the incident? Detective Mann shook his head. No, we knew he was at school, and we had no reason to believe he had left the school grounds. The detective paused and glanced at the defendant's table. That's on my conscience. I knew his father was a devious man, and I should have realized that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, Lynn objected, and the judge ruled Mann's statement inadmissible, but it was an alarming sign. Detective Mann, going back to the video Danny sent to his relatives, could that be confirmation of a premeditated plan? A plan in which Danny told his relatives what to wear that day and to have alibis. Maybe you've been looking for the wrong person all this time? Objection! Lynn roared, but it was too late. The jury members all turned their eyes to Danny. How did he figure it out? Danny asked. That evening, the group gathered at the law firm of Keel and Dunaway. The remains of several pizzas were cooling as they discussed the day's testimony. It seems Roland Cruz, Esquire, is much smarter than people give him credit for, Lynn replied. He figured out that everything your father, your uncle, Betty Lou, and Bobby Lee did was a cover to give you a chance to escape punishment for Kane's murder. Maybe you were too smart for your own good. He either didn't know that Betty Lou abandoned her motorcycle a block from the school, or he can't prove it, so he's not taken the case. What do we do now? Betty Lou asked. I'll make a deal with Kane, Grant said. No, they all said in unison. We're in this together, Betty Lou said, and Danny Leland and Bobby Lee nodded in agreement. How badly were we hurt today? Danny Lynn asked. No doubt it left a mark. But Kat helped us more than Kane did. The predator comment was genius. Lynn looked at Grant with some surprise. What do you think of her statement? Grant shrugged. I'm glad she was able to slip in the predator comment, but how did her statement affect me overall? Not at all. She'll always be in my life as Danny's mother, but that's it. He took Lynn's left hand and brought it to his lips, smiling at his partner. Kane will be testifying tomorrow, and I'm confident Cruz will have the plaintiff's claims dismissed. We'll quickly put together a witness list, so the trial will most likely be over by tomorrow afternoon. Either way, we should have a verdict by the day after tomorrow. The group sat in hushed silence, contemplating the end of the trial and the possible verdict. As expected, the first witness called the next morning was Randy Kane, former head coach of the Ferguson Wildcats football team. After he was sworn in, Raleigh Cruz began his questioning. Coach Kane, he began, prompting an immediate reaction from the defense table. Objection, Lynn declared. Mr. Kane is not currently employed as a coach. I would like to remind Mr. Cruz that Mr. Kane was fired for having an affair with a married teacher. The judge thought for a moment, then shook his head. Counsel, I overrule your objection. Mr. Kane was a coach in the past. Many years ago, I coached my son's team in a youth league. When I run into any of his teammates, they still call me Coach Bowman. For the time being, I will allow the plaintiff to use the honorific title, Coach. Just as Cruz was about to gloat over the lawyer, his attention was momentarily distracted by the surprised look on Lynn Danaway's face. Let's continue. Coach Kane, could you describe your relationship with Catherine Kill to the court? Kane managed to put a sad expression on his face. I was in love with her. I didn't want to fall in love with a married woman, but sometimes your heart leads you where it shouldn't. I know I did the wrong thing, and I deeply regret my role in this affair to her husband. Randy paused and looked at Grant with what he thought was a sincere expression of apology. I was wrong, but that doesn't excuse what they did to me. Kane pointed angrily at the defense table. Cruz clapped his hands to calm Kane down. Did Mrs. Kill reciprocate your feelings? Yes, at least I thought so. She said she loved me, but as soon as I asked her to divorce her husband and marry me, she rejected me. We talked about her husband, but if she thought I was putting him down or something like that, she got angry with me. She wouldn't let me say anything bad about him, which I thought was funny. Kane shook his head and looked sadly at Kat sitting at the back of the courtroom. The only thing I did wrong was fall in love with the wrong person and then try to do the right thing. Turning to the jury, Kane took on a sad and melancholy expression. Cruz looked at the jury and wasn't sure if they sympathized with his client, but he knew from experience that juries were very difficult to read. How was your relationship with her son, Danny? Cruz asked. Good, Kane replied. It was his first year at Ferguson High School and my first year as head coach. Danny came in with tremendous talent, and I think I was able to bring out his potential and make him one of the best quarterbacks in the state, maybe even in the country. We had a very close coach-player relationship, and I thought he considered me almost like a stepfather. Now I realize I was wrong. If that was Danny attacking me, then I never really knew him. At that point, Cruz fell silent, and Lynn Danaway began her questioning. Mr. Kane, how do you define the term man? Cruz immediately objected, asking if the question was relevant. At the judge's request, Lynn explained that it would soon become clear. The judge allowed the question to be asked, but warned Lynn to be careful. I believe that a man is someone who his friends can always rely on, who will cover for them and be there for them. Someone who always gives 110%, someone who lives his life in such a way that he can hold his head high and say that he did everything he could for himself and for his team. Mirror. Kane, it's so important to you that you even hung that sign above the locker room exit, right? Lynn handed Kane a photo with the words, "Play like a man today" written on it. Yes, Kane said, feeling uncomfortable with where the question was going. When the players come out of the locker room, they touch the sign, right? Yes? Mr. Kane, would you say that all these eloquent descriptions of what it means to be a man have affected your relationship with Danny Keel? Kane stared intently at Lynn, who sat silently after her question. Your Honor, could you ask the witness to answer my question? Without waiting for the judge's response, Randy barked, No. Is that what you wanted to hear? No, my actions were not what a man should do, but I made a mistake in falling in love with a woman who I thought loved me. A married woman, Lynn emphasized. Yes, a married woman, Kane said, unable to hide his bitterness. Mr. Kane, tell us how you attacked Danny Keel. The change in direction of the conversation momentarily threw Kane off balance. What, I never attacked Danny. You mean the time I thought he was angry and was going to attack me? That was just a minor altercation. There was no attack. Thank you for putting that on the record, Mr. Kane. You've talked a lot about how you mentored Danny and how he became the quarterback he is today. Did you receive any coaching offers from colleges and universities after Ferguson won the state championship? Yes, I received several offers, Kane replied. Because of the assault, they were all withdrawn. Really, Mr. Kane? Because of the assault? Lynn walked over to the defendant's table, picked up several sheets of paper, brought them to the witness stand, and handed them to Kane. Are these copies of your letters with the offers? She asked. After looking over the letters for a minute, Kane confirmed that they were letters with offers from several colleges. Mr. Kane, each of these letters seems to depend on whether you can hire Danny Kyle. Is that correct? Kane's face flushed with embarrassment. He couldn't understand how this bitch had gotten copies of the letters. Yes, that's correct, he replied sharply. Danny, like his father, was going to attend West Point. He was recommended by a congressman and was accepted. You insisted that Cat Keel talk him out of going there and instead go with you to the college where you were hired. Is that correct? Yes, but I knew it was best for him. If he had played in a D1 school, he would have made it to the NFL and earned millions. He would have been set for life. And if you had followed him to the NFL as a coach, you would still be alive, wouldn't you? It seems your reputation as a coach was as solid as your relationship with Danny Kill, wasn't it? Kane looked back at Lynn, who turned to the judge and said, I have no further questions for this witness, Your Honor. Returning from lunch, Lynn approached her first witness, Danny Kill. After being sworn in, Danny took the witness stand. Danny, when did you first learn about your mother's affair with Randy Kane? I don't remember the exact date, but it was shortly after it started. About a day or two. And what did you do when you found out? I FaceTimed my father to tell him what was going on. The audience gasped when Kat realized that her son's loyalty to his father surpassed his loyalty to his cheating mother. How did your father react? At first, he didn't believe me. Then he was in shock for a while. Then he calmed down and said he would contact me when he had thought everything through. We talked a few days later and he told me to do what Kane and Mom were doing for now. I did. When Mom realized I knew everything, she told me to keep quiet and that things would settle down in time. But if I told Dad, he would divorce her and destroy our family. As she asked her questions, Lynn moved closer to the jury and saw that they were sympathetic to Danny. Danny, your mother mentioned a minor argument that Mr. Kane referred to as a quarrel in his testimony. Can you describe that incident to the jury? I was sitting at the breakfast table in the kitchen. My mom and Mr. Kane either didn't know or didn't care that I was home. It was clear what they were doing. I stood up and took a step toward him, and he jumped back, tripping me. I hit the kitchen floor so hard that it took my breath away. The audience gasped again and began to cry when Kat realized her involvement in the horrific disrespect Randy Kane had shown her family. Raleigh Cruz could only watch in horror, as the jury had long since ceased to sympathize with Randy Kane. Danny, there's a lot to talk about the video where you ask your family members to come to your rally. The plaintiffs claim that you, a high school senior, were the mastermind behind some grand conspiracy to attack Mr. Kane and then cover it up. I guess they think you came up with this plan in class or maybe in the school cafeteria. Lynn waited for the laughter to die down and noticed again that several members of the jury were looking sympathetically at Danny. Can you tell us about this video? Lynn asked, as the video was shown on the monitor in the courtroom. Danny looked seriously at the jury. I know you've heard about this many times during the trial, but the video really speaks for itself. After that, Lynn had no more questions for Danny, and she passed the right to ask questions to Raleigh Cruz, who had only one question for Danny. Danny, do you know who killed Randy Kane on the street outside your house? Danny looked at his father, then at Raleigh Cruz, and replied, Yes, I do. Raleigh was momentarily stunned by this admission, but then gathered his thoughts and asked, Who attacked Randy Kane? I did. I beat him up because he attacked me earlier and because he was having an affair with my mother. The audience sighed again, and Kat shouted, No, Danny! The judge banged his gavel to warn and calm the crowd in the courtroom. Cruz smiled triumphantly and bowed his head mockingly to Lynn. No further questions for this witness. When Danny left the witness stand, Lynn called the next witness, Grant Keel. After reviewing Grant's previous testimony, Lynn asked him for his opinion on the video recording of the attack on Kane, which had been filmed by Keel's door camera. The video speaks for itself, Grant replied to laughter from the jury. Do you know who attacked Randy Kane outside your house? Lynn asked. Yes, I do. It was me, Grant said. I beat him up for attacking Danny and having an affair with my wife. Objection, Raleigh Cruz shouted from the plaintiff's table. Your Honor, Danny Keel has already admitted that he attacked him. The defendants are just trying to confuse the jury. Mr. Cruz, you set the precedent by asking the witnesses that question. Your objection is overruled. Cruz had only one question for Grant. Who's lying, you or your son? Grant shrugged. To say that neither of us is lying is tantamount to saying that we are both lying, isn't it, counsel? Cruz blinked slowly, confused by the response. While he tried to untangle the knot Grant Keel had tied, several members of the jury smirked. Lynn dismissed Grant from the witness stand and called the next witness, Leland Keel. Keel's questioning followed the same pattern as Grant's. After confirming the accuracy of the transcript and stating that the transcript speaks for itself, Lynn asked Leland, the key question, do you know who attacked Randy Kane outside your brother's house? Raleigh Cruz shook his head, barely hiding his anger. He already knew the answer to Lynn Danaway's question. Yes, I do. It was me, Leland said. I beat him up for attacking Danny and having an affair with my brother's wife. Rolla looked at the jury, most of whom were trying to hide their smiles and laughter. He looked at his client and shook his head. After dismissing Leland, Lynn called Betty Lou Kill to the witness stand. Betty Lou's testimony ended with the words, Yes, I know. It was me. I beat him up for attacking Danny and having an affair with my brother-in-law's wife. Bobby Lee Gerson's testimony ended much the same way. Yes, I know, it was me. I attacked him for attacking Danny and for having an affair with my sister's husband's wife. Roland Cruz's helpless rage was evident in his closing statement to the jury when he pointed to the defendants. I don't need to prove my case. They've already proven it for me. One or more of the defendants brutally beat Randy Kane. After the attack, one or more of the defendants, acting together, conspired to conceal the crime and entered into a criminal conspiracy for that purpose. You, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, know what the truth is. Please do your duty and find Randy Kane guilty. Lynn's closing statement was equally brief. The only thing the plaintiffs have proven is that Randy Kane is a despicable man who has affairs with married women and then mocks their families. If there were any evidence of guilt, they would have been arrested. I ask that you find the defendants not guilty. Thank you. With that, Judge Bowman banged his gavel, dismissing the jury to deliberate. While the jury deliberated, the Ferguson Five, as they had dubbed themselves after Randy Kane's lawsuit, ate pizza in Grant's apartment. They believed they had done everything they could under the circumstances. No one had lied under oath or to the police, although they admitted they had not been entirely truthful in their statements. Even their admission that they had attacked Kane was, to some extent, true. They were indeed guilty, albeit in hindsight. How long do you think it will take the jury? Asked Bobby Lee Gerson. I don't think it will take them long to decide whether they're guilty or not. We admitted our guilt. The jury will spend most of their time deciding how much to pay that bastard. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. Grant took a bite of pizza and stared sullenly at the floor. He regretted letting the others talk him out of settling with Kane. If he had, it would all be over by now. How's your mom? Betty Lou asked Danny. Danny shrugged and rested his elbows on his knees. She's really bad. She comes home from school, goes straight to her room, and cries all night. We've talked to her several times about her affair and the divorce, but she's still having a hard time accepting it. When I asked her how she thought it would end when Dad found out, she cried so hard that I had to leave her alone in her room until she calmed down. She said she expected Dad to be angry with her, but that he would understand and fix everything because that's what he always did. When something went wrong, Dad fixed it. Only now was she beginning to understand that nothing could be fixed and that she was to blame for her situation. She was having fun and she learned about it, Leland replied firmly, responding to Betty Lou's reproachful glance. Thanks, Mr. Reddit, Betty Lou snorted. I almost feel sorry for her. I've been her friend since you two started dating. If she had feelings for another man, she could have contacted me, and I would have dropped everything to be with her. Any one of us could have done that. Instead, she distanced herself from those who cared about her most to be with that useless jerk. They nodded, reflecting on the foolishness of people in general and traitors in particular, when Lynn's cell phone rang. "Judge Bowman's clerk," she said. "The verdict is in." The five Fergusons and their lawyer stood as Judge Bowman entered the courtroom. When they took their seats, the judge asked the foreman of the jury if they had reached a verdict and if it was unanimous. The foreman handed the jury's verdict to the bailiff, who handed it to Judge Bowman. As all five, including Lynn, stood before the verdict was announced, Grant closed his eyes, once again regretting not offering Randy Kane a settlement. In the case of Randy Kane v. Grant Kill, Daniel Kill, Leland Kill, Betty Lou Kill, and Bobby Lee Gerson, we have concluded that there was a conspiracy to assault Randy Kane for his extramarital affair with Catherine Keefe and for Randy Kane's insults toward Daniel Keefe. When Judge Bowman paused, Grant felt somewhat defeated. The verdict was expected, but hearing it in court was humiliating. We also find that the plaintiff, Randy Kane, should receive from the defendants Grant Keel, Daniel Keel, Leland Keel, Betty Lou Keel, and Bobby Lee Gerson a total of $1,000 in actual damages and $100 in punitive damages. Judge Bowman looked through his glasses at the jury, who were looking at him with smug grins. Then he turned to the plaintiff's table and looked at Randy Kane. Kane's face was red with rage, and he stood up at the table and began hurling insults at the jury and the judge. "You let them get away with it? You stupid bastards! You call this justice?" Kane yelled, while Raleigh Cruz tried in vain to calm him down and get him back in his seat. "Do I have cause to assemble a jury?" Bowman asked. The foreman of the jury grinned at the judge and shook his head. Bowman sighed and turned to the defendants. "You have 90 days to appeal the verdict, but something tells me you'll accept it and walk away with a clean slate." The six people gathered around the defendant's table laughed, smiled, and hugged each other as Judge Bowman dismissed the jury and banged his gavel, ending the trial. Kat stood up, looked proudly at her former family, and walked out of the courtroom alone, tears streaming down her cheeks. Of course, the verdict was not appealed. The group took it as a victory, and Grant happily wrote a check for $110. The check was made out to the court, which was to forward the money to Raleigh Cruz, so that there would be no further need to communicate with the former coach, who left the area immediately after Cruz wrote him a check for $707, the amount specified. In the jury's verdict, minus 30% for Raleigh's interest. Cruz was disappointed, but resigned himself to the fact that he had been dealt a bad hand. Such is the nature of conditional cases. Soon, Grant and Lynn returned to their usual legal practice. As their relationship deepened, they discussed what to do with Lynn's apartment. The question of children also came up. Lynn wanted at least one, preferably two, but Grant didn't want any. At 46, he considered himself too old to be a father. Lynn told Grant he was an idiot. So, at the age of 47, Grant Kill became a father again. Grant and Lynn weren't the only new parents in the Kill family. Leland and Betty Lou decided to adopt a child. Betty Lou had known her whole life that she couldn't have children, but she had always wondered if she should adopt. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for more videos.